Hello everyone, Stropes here again. I'm going to go through a deck tech using a new leader, Gar Saxon, who was spoiled in the last few days. Carabas.net beta, it does currently allow the use of some Shadows of the Galaxy cards, but unfortunately cards that were spoiled after the 5th haven't really been added to the functionality, and a number of them, including Gar Saxon and the Clan Saxon Gauntlet specifically, there's no pictures. The pictures were just added to the official Star Wars Unlimited website. But long story short, not all of these cards are functional. I thought that I could go into Carabas.net, play a few games with this deck. Some of the cards work, like Dr. Eva Zan, but some of them don't, so not able to do that just yet. But I thought that I would post this deck tech. I'll link back to it when these cards are added, and we'll play with it at that point in the game. So we'll go ahead, get right into the deck tech. This deck, just calling it Imperial Bureaucracy because it's got an admin tower, and Gar Saxon in this version is an Imperial. So Gar Saxon himself, if you don't know, he gives each friendly upgraded unit a +1/+0, so a power boost. So a lot of our cards are synergizing around that. It is worth noting that token upgrades, including shield upgrades and experience counters, count for that power boost. So the main core of this deck, if you've been watching our Boba Blue deck gameplay, you'll see the restocks. A single restock main deck. You'll see the 3 Vigilance, and you'll see the 3 Bounty Hunter Crews, along with some other cards that are probably pretty familiar to you. The core of this deck is based around that Boba Blue deck. We want it to be that versatile kind of toolbox build, but with a Gar Saxon spin on it, doing what he can do specifically. The main play with Boba Blue is you are immediately grabbing initiative on round number 1, and then round number 2 you are playing one of your 6 1-drop cards, either one of your Greedos or Mining Guild tie, after you've removed or bounced or interacted with your opponent's unit to get that Boba trigger to be up on the resources to do that. That line of play is not possible, obviously, since Gar Saxon is not Boba Fett. He's not getting us up on resources in that way, but what he makes up for is that he is buffing all of our units and can put quite a bit of power on the board, which you'll see here in a minute as I go through. We'll start. The restocks are really, I'll just go card by card. The restocks are here to go with the Bounty Hunter Crews and the Vigilance, and since it's on main deck, we can basically go infinite looping the deck with these cards. Really important in control mirrors, but also sometimes if you're like drawing a whole bunch, or your opponent's letting you draw all with like all of your I Am Your Father, sometimes you almost mill yourself, depending on if they're letting you draw. Usually, they should not really be letting you draw, and if they are, it's usually not very good for them, but sometimes you do get in the case that you still need to loop your deck anyway, even though it is a fringe case. But against control, it's really key to grab that, because that way you can actually compete in a control mirror in a way that you couldn't if you didn't have those cards. So they are main decked, they're not in the sideboard. We're running 2 Inferno 4s. Inferno 4 is a really great card. I just went down to 2 copies because he doesn't really get a buff from Gar Saxon, but it does have when played, when defeated. You can look at the top 2 and then leave them there, put them on the bottom. So it's filtering, digs through about 4 cards if you're binning most of them or putting them on the bottom. The big difference here is Bib Fortuna. Like one of the newer cards that we're using. Bib Fortuna does come out with a shield, so he's not a 1/3 with Gar Saxon. He is a 2/3, and his action ability is that you can play an event for 1 less. This was run in Stephen Lee's Boba Blue build, but most of the time I just did not think it was quick enough to be able to stabilize before like the board would get flooded with like U-wings or things like that, and then you're trying to just use him to blow up everything with the super laser blast anyway. But I do think we're going to try him out because of Gar Saxon being a 2-3 with that shield is a little bit better. Plus, I do think that action ability is relevant because it does allow us to play the Vigilances on 5, Search Your Feelings on 3, etc. We are also running Bazine Natal. Her when played is that you can look at an opponent's hand and then have them discard one of those cards. If you do, they draw one. So if you'll notice, a lot of blue-black decks main deck Spark of Rebellion. Spark of Rebellion is off aspect because it's a heroism cunning card. So you're paying 4 for it. Bazine, you're only paying 2 for her. The difference here, though, is a pretty significant difference in the fact that Bazine lets them draw. But if you're discarding their Super Laser Blast, you're discarding their Restock, you're discarding some key card that they need, especially in those combo decks, we don't really care that they're drawing because even if they draw into removal or something, if we remove their core combo pieces, it's not that big of a deal. Since it's not straight discarding the card, I think it is probably worse in aggro, but since we're trying to use new cards, we're going to try her out. It's also worth noting that she's got Smuggle for 4, which is the same cost as Spark, so if we resource her early on, which I think we probably will be doing, you don't necessarily want to be having them discard and draw that early in the game. We can always play her late game, get her out, and then discard when we're trying to win that control game. Dr. Evazan is a really great new card. He's a 3/3 shielded 2-cost card, so really great stats. The reason he's got such great stats is that he's got bounty, and that bounty is that allows whoever claims that bounty to ready 12 resources, which is a ton. So like I was saying, it synergizes. I mean, it's a good card anyway, but with Gar Saxon, he's actually a 4/3 shielded 4/2. So he can be hitting for quite a lot. I think there's a version of this deck which leans more into tempo. Some of those I put in the sideboard there, down here with the surprise strikes, because you could be hitting for 7 with him at that point. And we'll skip ahead a minute, skip over that power. But like with the 7th Fleet Defenders, you're in the same case. It costs 3, but because they come out with the shield, they're really great into A-Wings already. But with Gar Saxon giving them the shield, giving them the buff, they go up to 4/2s, which is really huge, like on 3, really large units. You could probably push out like a ton of damage. And like I said, there's probably a less control-y way of playing this and a more tempo damage pushing way. And maybe we'll explore that going forward. If you've got any suggestions, leave them in the comments. These are me just, trying to play around, explore with some of the new cards, see where we can go, using a kind of firm foundation in cards that already exist, and then just trying to add or like decks that already exist, of course cards, but like deck formats, deck forms that already exist, and then kind of bend them to the newer cards. So if you've got a good way to do that, a tempo deck or something like that, or you see how like we could push a ton more damage, let me know. I'd be happy to try it out. But we're still maining 3 Power of the Dark Side, still a really great card, because Dr. Evazan, we can like run into stuff if we need to, kill a 4 power thing, and then still Power of the Dark Side them. When we're playing, because of the bounty, we want to be careful when Dr. Evazan dies. We can waylay him back to our own hand if we think something bad is going to happen. Things like that. So if we need to, we've got some outs, but like early game, if they untap with everything and it's not aggro, it's not like a huge deal. You're just gonna have to pay attention, and we're gonna have to pay attention when we're playing over like when he dies, how he dies, because that could swing the game potentially, but we want to be pushing out a whole lot of damage before then. We're still running the 3 waylays, the 3 I Am Your Fathers, just because we want our 3 a bunch of those 3-cost interactions, so that when we're up to 6 or so, we can be like have multiple options for that removal. I Am Your Father, just because control decks are usually card hungry, so there's a argument to be made for Dr. think it's Pershing. I might be forgetting his name. There's a blue-black card on 2 that taps to deal a damage to your unit. He's a 0/5 and he lets you draw a card. So we may do a version of this deck with him. In fact, when we come back, when we can like actually use these cards, we might actually be slotting that Inferno 4 out. But the thing is, we kind of want some space units, you know, and trying to spread it out. And we've got like a whole lot of ground, but it's just like, what can we trade? What do we need to trade? I'm not really sure. Maybe we could get rid of one I Am Your Father, one Client, or I don't know, one of these other cards like Childson, maybe one less Childson, put those in. But just like we want to draw cards. So I'm Your Father is actually really good, I think, in these blue-black decks, because you do want to be drawing into the cards, especially if Childson is also in your deck. I don't think it was in George Hudson's deck, which is what we were using when we were playing Boba Blue later, when we were using that build. But they do synergize together in the sense of like, if they let you draw the cards, which usually they, again, should probably not be doing, you're getting like a benefit either way. So it's a lose-lose for them, because you're either dealing the 7 and killing the thing that they don't want you to kill, or you're drawing, and you're usually drawing into more removal or more stall or more healing. So kind of puts them in a bad situation. With Childson, he or Childson, I'm not sure the exact way, if there's like an official way of pronouncing that or not, but he, you can reveal up to 4 blue cards in your hand, and then he gets more experience. Again, synergizing with Gar Saxon. The Client is a new card. He comes out with the shield. So with Gar, he is a 3/5. His action is you get to tap, and then you put a bounty on something. That bounty is that you will heal 5. So, which is a ton of damage. Even Vigilance at 6 is pretty hard for control, or not control, for aggro to overcome. The Client just makes it even harder. I was really debating on like the Vigilances, but you know, like if we've got that 3 healing in the Client, do we really need all of that healing on Vigilance? I don't know. I think there's a case to be made for that. Maybe the Vigilances go into a sideboard if you're just facing aggro, and you're not going into like a control mirror. But in a control mirror, you're playing like a completely different game. You basically like need the Vigilances to mill, otherwise you're going to lose that game. So, and they need to be main or side. Somewhere they need to be present. Same thing with the crew and the restocks, but maybe these 7 just go into the sideboard for control, and then like main deck you're just running like Greedos and surprise strikes to push out a lot more damage, because you don't really need these other things, because the Client will heal you enough that you don't need the Vigilance. That might be how this ends up, and maybe we'll try that out, but just something to think about there. The Childsons I talked about a little bit already, but I think worth noting that if you do get those 4, if you can get him up to the 6/6 that he would normally be, again, Gar is buffing him by 1. So he can actually kill a Boba, and he's a Sentinel, because you can get him up to 7 damage. He would not be a 6/6, he'd be a 7/6. So I think, again, he's buffed a fair amount. I think that is a pretty critical number to get up to, just due to the sheer presence of Boba in the meta. Being able to kill a Boba and force that, plus with the I Am Your Fathers can kill the Boba, or the Fire Spray. Yeah, it makes it like really rough, and Boba is one of the top decks, so, you know, plus Childson, you can also easily get him up to 5, to kill the Sabines, if you need to, because you're basically getting that 1 power for less. So you're getting a little bit more for your money with Gar. Search Your Feelings is main decked here, just because it is a... Alright, sorry about that. I had to cough. Back to Search Your Feelings. We've got 2 main deck copies of this. Since this is a toolbox deck, we want to have the right answers at the right time, pull out the specific cards that we need from our deck, because we've got like a 1 of an Avenger, a 1 of in the restocks, and sometimes you really just need a Vigilance, or you need a removal, or you need your Super Laser Blast. Maybe you've resourced one of the 2 earlier in the game because you drew it on a mulligan in first turn, and you really had to resource it, so you need to pull your last one out. Things like that. So Search of Feelings, especially if we can play it on 3 with Bib, is really, I think, pretty playable, usable, and good in this deck to grab the specific things that we need. Vigilance. I don't know as much more can be said about Vigilance. It's a really great card, necessary in the control matchup. It can also stabilize you against aggro, so it's good against either of those. It's really even pretty good against mid-range if that mid-range deck is running like 7th fleets, like you can see there, because one of the modes is to just defeat a unit with 3 or less health, and 7th fleets, have 2, and A-wings have 3, so it hits a lot of very relevant cards, at least right now. So pretty useful. We're running Bosks here. I'm not so sure about these Bosks since we're going up a whole lot more on units. Because our Spark of Rebellions turned into these Bazines. Some of our 2-cost removal, like No Good to Me Dead, turned into Dr. Eva Zen. And we're doing like a lot more with units than we would have been doing with events. So this is more of like a unit control deck as opposed to like a unit list control. So I don't know how this will fare that well either, with like if bounties become like a real thing, because we're basically putting out a whole bunch of things for them to put bounties on potentially. But I think we can like overcome that with the buff and with our control cards that we've got, make it a little bit harder on them. But if we want to run into unit list control ourselves, we're just gonna have to try and out damage them really. But as far as boss goes, I do think that's relevant. These maybe should be switched out for syndicate lackeys. And I might do that before we run this on Carabas.net, just because there's a whole lot less events for Bosk to hit. If you've got like mainly events in the deck, I think the 2 damage from Bosk can be really great. You can deal sometimes like 8 damage. I think I've done up to 10 with him across different cards, because you're just playing multiple events, because you've got so many. And especially with Boba, in Boba Blue, you're readying a lot, going up to 2, so the No Good to Me Deads with him just synergize really nicely together. Since we're not doing that, and this is not a Boba deck, there might be something better to switch here, and we might even just be like running more low cost removal or bounce, in that slot. And then Bounty Hunter Cruise, just here again to go infinite with the restock and the vigilance, or to pull some specific card that we need out of our deck. Really need that suite of cards, but I don't know as we need 3 of them necessarily. This main deck is really kind of like for can combat control really nice, because you've already got the 3, and the 1 there. The next big new card would be the Clan Saxon Gauntlet down here on 6. So since we're not in Boba, we're obviously not running Fett's Fire Spray, because it doesn't come out readied, and we don't have Boba units, so no real point in doing that. You might say, why are we paying 6 for a 4/5? That doesn't really make any sense, especially if there's going to be a lot of Fire Sprays. Fire Sprays would just run into this and kill it, and then the Fire Spray would survive, except that is not the case in this specific deck either with Gar Saxon, because what will happen is the Clan Saxon Gauntlet has Sentinel. When this unit is attacked, you may give an experience token to a friendly unit before the damage is dealt. So here, that means it can survive a Fire Spray anyway, because it would go up to being a 5/6, so they would kind of just bounce off each other. But since we've got Gar Saxon, it's not a 5/6, it's actually a 6/6. So it will kill the Fire Spray and stick around itself. So really good to kind of mess with those Boba decks. Again, this plus some of these other things that mess with Boba, I think this deck is kind of tailored pretty well to deal with some of the stuff that Boba decks are doing. We've got another new card here in Rivals Fall. It is just a kind of it's just another removal. So instead of the takedowns, we've switched them to this. It is more expensive, but that's keeping in mind that Bib is tapping to make it cost 1 less, so it can come out on 5 if we've got Bib out, and this just straight up defeats a unit. So The takedowns, of course, are kind of like more useful into the Sabines, but there's some really big units, depending on the deck, leader units that you might want to just get rid of with this, because otherwise we could be like running vanquishes, and maybe that's what we should also think about sideboarding. I'm not sure that Rivals Fall is the best thing in this deck. It does make it a little bit top heavy, plus the boss, plus this other stuff. So we might, again, like lower our curve a little bit instead of having so many high cost cards. But I did want to at least give it a shot and try out again, since we're just trying to try out new cards. Try out a new card, see how it works. If it doesn't work, switch it to a takedown or something. And then the top end is the same top end as the Boba Blue, which is the Super Laser Blast. We're running 2 of those, and then 1 Avenger. I may switch this for Supreme Leader Snoke as the finisher, or switch the Super Laser Blast, because they kind of fulfill a similar role. If we make the aggro deck characters so small that they can't really do any damage, or, you know, finish out the game, especially if we've got so much healing from the client, so much healing from Vigilance, we can kind of like lock out the game potentially with Snoke. So we might try Snoke on the top end. He had not come out when I first put this together yesterday, but maybe we'll try him out, and of course if it doesn't work, we'll just slot these back in. But I'm gonna play it like at least like as quickly as I can. I think Gar Saxon should be added soon enough, and I think that the Clan Saxon Gauntlet should be added soon enough. They've been around for a day or two, so they should be getting on there soon enough. I know Snoke was just spoiled, so he might take a little bit longer. So we're just gonna go like once we need the Clan Saxon Gauntlet and we need Gar Saxon. Those are really the kind of 2 things that we're waiting on, but once those are on there, we should be good to go from that respect. The sideboard, I can go over it real quick, but it's really just kind of depending on the matchup. You might want your 2 restocks mained just to have that insurance and control, plus a Super Laser Blast against the decks where you need that. Having another copy can help. And Search and the Avenger, again, like if you need to pull your Avengers or pull specific things and your matchups are leaning toward going the Avenger line, you might just need, you know, another copy of that plus that. I have added the Greedo to the sideboard and the Surprise Strikes, just because, like I said, I think there's a tempo version of this deck that could push some damage through a whole lot. If they're on like a 25 health base and we play Dr. Evazan and then we Surprise Strike him, that's 7 damage right there, or even on a 7th fleet, and that is almost a third of the base health right from there. So I think there's a version of this where we play stuff like Greedo, stuff like the Surprise Strikes, and then just try and like push out a whole lot of damage really quick, and then stall with the Bazines, and maybe even main deck Sparks too, and have like a whole lot of discard to kind of hold them off. But I think that's it for now. If you like the deck tech, leave a comment below. If you've got you know, some suggestions, like I said, for like a more tempo oriented version of this deck that pushes out more damage, I've been kind of thinking about that myself. I'd be happy to hear your suggestions, so leave some in the comments below. Other than that, I hope to see you in the games once they are finally, once I can use this deck on Karabast. If you like this content, and if you want to see gameplay, be sure to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.